The intercepted warning Captain Vex flexed his four muscular arms as he studied the holographic display floating above the bridge of the Crimson Fong. His scaled green hide rippled with anticipation, and his yellow eyes gleamed with the hunger of a predator who hadn't made a good score in weeks. The Krillian pirate had built his reputation on calculated risks and aggressive tactics that had served him well across three-star systems. Captain called out his communications officer, a nervous Zenthari named Pip, whose translucent blue skin flickered with anxiety patterns. "I'm picking up an unusual broadcast on the emergency frequencies. It's not a distress call, but some kind of warning message." Vex's reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. Warnings usually meant valuable cargo was moving through their territory, and valuable cargo meant profit. He gestured with two of his arms for Pip to display the message. The hologram shimmered and reformed into text that made Vex's yellow eyes narrow with interest. The message was simple, almost crude in its directness, to all raiders, scavengers, and hostile vessels. The merchant ship Starbound Merchant carries human crew. Choose different targets. This warning serves your survival interests, broadcasting continuously on all emergency bands. Grix, his weapons officer and fellow Krillian, let out a barking laugh that echoed through the bridge. His scarred hide bore the marks of dozens of successful raids, and his confidence was absolute. "Humans, those pink weaklings from the Edge systems? Captain, this has to be some kind of psychological warfare. Everyone knows humans are barely out of their home system and pose no threat to experienced raiders like us." The bridge crew murmured agreement. Vex had hand-picked each member for their skills and ruthless efficiency. Besides Grix and Pip, there was Thorek, a massive Gorlin whose rocky exterior concealed surprising intelligence, and Zara, a quick-thinking Velen whose multiple eyes could track several targets simultaneously. They had worked together for 3 standard years, building a reputation that made merchant captains surrender without firing a shot. "Show me their ship's profile," Vex commanded, settling into his captain's chair with the satisfaction of a hunter who had spotted easy prey that Pip's fingers danced across his console, and the display shifted to show a detailed scan of their target. The Starbound Merchant was a typical cargo hauler, nothing more than a flying warehouse with basic engines and minimal defensive systems. According to their sensors, the ship carried a crew of only 2 beings, with one life sign clearly reading as human according to the Galactic species database. 2 crew members for a ship that size, Thorek rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Either they're incredibly confident or incredibly stupid. Zara's multiple eyes blinked in sequence as she processed the tactical information. The warning broadcast is coming from a different source entirely. It's not even from the merchant ship. Someone else is trying to protect them. Vex stood and paced to the forward viewport, his claws clicking against the metal deck. Beyond the reinforced glass, stars streaked past as the Crimson Fong maintained pursuit course. The starbound merchant was visible as a distant speck of light, apparently unaware of their approach. Analysis of the warning message shows it's been broadcasting for approximately 6 standard hours, Pip reported, his skin cycling through worried color patterns. The source appears to be a deep space communication relay, possibly automated. Automated warnings to protect human merchants, Grix scoffed. Their government must be getting desperate. Captain, with respect, we've raided Zenthari convoys protected by military escorts, taken down Gorlin cargo ships with full security details, and outmaneuvered Velen pursuit squadrons. 2 humans on a cargo hauler shouldn't even require our full attention. The bridge crew's confidence was infectious, and Vex felt his own doubts melting away. He had built his career on reading situations correctly, and this felt like an overreaction to a minor threat. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community, barely a century out of their home system. Their technology was primitive compared to the established species, and their military forces were small and inexperienced. Pip, scan their communication frequencies. Are they calling for help? Vex asked. Negative, Captain. The starbound merchant hasn't sent any distress signals or changed course. They appear to be maintaining normal commercial flight patterns. Thorek's massive frame shifted as he leaned forward to study the tactical display. Could be a trap. Maybe they want us to board them. With what? Zara's voice carried skeptical undertones. Their ship barely has shields, let alone weapons. If it's a trap, it's the most poorly equipped one in Galactic history. Vex made his decision with the certainty that had made him successful. Fear was a luxury that pirates couldn't afford, and reputation was everything in their business. If word got out that the Crimson Fong had been scared off by a warning about humans, they would become a laughingstock across the sector. We intercept as planned, he announced, but we approach with full caution protocols. Grix, have all weapon systems ready, but not actively targeting. Thorek, prepare boarding equipment and restraints. Zara, monitor all frequencies for any changes in the situation. The Crimson Fong was a modified Krillian assault vessel, built for speed and intimidation. Its hull was painted blood red with black markings that resembled predatory claws, and its weapon systems were clearly visible from any angle. The ship's reputation preceded it through 3-star systems, and most merchants surrendered immediately upon seeing its distinctive silhouette. As they closed distance with their target, Vex felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with a successful hunt. The warning message continued its repetitive broadcast, but he dismissed it as amateur psychological warfare. Humans might be clever enough to try intimidation tactics, but they lacked the experience to make such strategies effective against seasoned pirates. Target acquired and locked. Grix reported, ready to disable their engines on your command. Hail them first. Vex ordered, let's follow proper piracy protocols. Give them a chance to surrender peacefully. Pip activated the communication array, and the Crimson Fong's signal reached the starbound merchant within seconds. The response came back almost immediately, carried by a voice that sounded remarkably calm for someone about to be robbed. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the merchant vessel Starbound Merchant. Hello there. I assume you're here about the cargo? The casualness of the response caught the bridge crew off guard. Most victims either panicked or tried to negotiate desperately. This human sounded like she was greeting expected visitors. Vex activated his own communication system, his voice carrying the menacing tone that had intimidated hundreds of crews. This is Captain Vex of the Crimson Fong. You are about to be boarded and your cargo confiscated. Surrender immediately and you will not be harmed. Oh, you're pirates, came the cheerful reply. That's wonderful. I was wondering when someone would finally show up. I've been hauling cargo through this sector for months now, and this is my first piracy encounter. Very exciting. The bridge crew exchanged confused glances. This was not how terrified merchants were supposed to respond to pirate threats. Are you mocking us, human? Grix snarled into the communication array. Not at all. I'm genuinely pleased to meet you. It gets quite lonely out here with just me and my AI companion. Speaking of which, did you happen to receive any warning broadcasts on your way over? I've been getting reports that someone's been sending out messages about human ships. Vex felt the first stirring of unease in his chest, but he pushed it aside. We received your pathetic warning message. It failed to discourage us. Oh, that wasn't for me, Sarah Chun replied with what sounded like genuine surprise. I don't know who's been sending those. Probably some well-meaning bureaucrat back home. Humans do love their safety regulations and warning labels. The communication crackled with what might have been laughter. Actually, that gives me an idea. Since you're going to be boarding my ship anyway, would you mind if I asked you a few questions about those warnings? I'm conducting an informal survey about interspecies communication effectiveness. Thorek's rocky features managed to convey bewilderment. Is she conducting research while being robbed? I think she might be, Zara whispered, all of her eyes focused on the communication console as if it might provide answers. Vex decided to regain control of the situation through direct action. Grix, disable their engines. We're boarding immediately. The Crimson Fong's weapon systems fired a precise electromagnetic pulse that should have knocked out the starbound merchant's propulsion systems without causing hull damage. Instead, the merchant ship continued on course without any apparent effect. That's odd, Grix muttered, checking his targeting systems. Direct hit, but no result. Maybe their engines are already offline, Thorak suggested. Some cargo haulers shut down non-essential systems to conserve power during long flights. The communication system crackled again with Captain Chen's voice. Are you trying to disable my engines? Because that's not going to work. I had them shielded specifically for situations like this. Vex felt his confidence beginning to crack like ice under pressure. Shielded? What kind of merchant ship has military-grade shielding? The kind operated by someone who, used to design defensive systems for the Terran Space Force, came the cheerful reply. Don't worry, though, I'm retired now. These days I just haul cargo and pursue my hobbies. The bridge crew stared at each other with growing apprehension. Military background changed everything. Veterans were unpredictable, dangerous, and prone to creative problem-solving that often ended badly for pirates. What kind of hobbies? Pip asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Oh, I study historical military tactics, collect vintage weapons, and analyze ship vulnerabilities. Nothing too exciting, really. Although I have been working on this fascinating project involving unconventional boarding countermeasures. Grix's scarred hide was beginning to show stress patterns. Captain, maybe we should reconsider this target. Nonsense, Vex replied, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. She's still just one human on a cargo ship. We've handled military veterans before. The starbound merchant suddenly changed course, not away from the Crimson Fong, but directly toward them. The maneuver was executed with precision that spoke of advanced pilot training and complete confidence. Actually, Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system with a note of excitement. Since you're here anyway, would you mind participating in a little experiment? I've been developing some theories about optimal boarding procedures, and I could really use some test subjects with real-world experience. Zara's multiple eyes were now tracking the approaching merchant ship with obvious alarm. Captain, she's not running. She's coming right at us. I can see that, Vex snapped, his yellow eyes fixed on the growing silhouette of their supposed victim. The thing about humans, Captain Chun continued conversationally, is that we have this really inconvenient tendency to turn routine encounters into learning opportunities. It's probably a survival trait from our evolutionary development. The starbound merchant was now close enough that they could see details of its hull configuration. What had appeared to be a standard cargo hauler from a distance revealed itself to be something far more sophisticated. Hidden weapon ports were becoming visible, and the ship's movements suggested acceleration capabilities well beyond civilian specifications. Captain, Thorak rumbled nervously, I'm beginning to think that warning message might have been legitimate. Vex 4 arms gripped his command chair as he watched their intended victim approach with the confident bearing of a predator rather than prey. For the first time in his pirating career, he was beginning to suspect that he might have made a serious error in judgment. The communication system activated one more time, and Captain Chen's voice filled the bridge with the same cheerful tone that was becoming increasingly ominous. Don't worry about the weapons systems you're probably noticing. They're just for show. I prefer educational approaches to conflict resolution. She paused, and when she spoke again, there was something in her voice that made Vex's scaled hide crawl with primitive fear. Besides, the really interesting part of this experiment hasn't even started yet. The educational experience, the docking sequence between the Crimson Fong and the starbound merchant proceeded with an eerie smoothness that made Captain Vex's forearms twitch with nervous energy. What should have been a forced boarding had somehow transformed into what felt like a scheduled appointment. Captain Sarah Chun had not only agreed to allow them aboard, she had actually provided detailed docking instructions to ensure optimal airlock alignment. This feels wrong, Grix muttered as he checked his weapon systems for the 5th time in as many minutes. His scarred hide displayed stress patterns that Vex had rarely seen from his normally confident weapons officer. Pirates don't get invited aboard their targets. Pip's translucent skin flickered through an entire spectrum of worried colors as he monitored communication channels. Captain, she's been broadcasting some kind of educational content while we docked. historical analysis of successful boarding procedures, tactical advantages of different ship configurations, that sort of thing. Educational content. Thorek's rocky features manage to convey incredulity. She's giving us a lecture? Zara's multiple eyes tracked the readouts from their hull sensors with growing unease. The really disturbing part is that her analysis is completely accurate. She just explained 3 different ways our current boarding approach could be improved for maximum efficiency. Vex felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. In his years of piracy, he had learned to trust his instincts above all else, and every instinct he possessed was screaming warnings. But retreat now would destroy his crew's confidence and his own reputation. Throughout the sector, the airlock seals engaged with a soft hiss, and the boarding ramp extended into the starbound merchant's cargo bay. What greeted them was not the cramped, utilitarian space typical of merchant vessels, but a well-organized area that looked more like a mobile workshop than a cargo hold. Captain Sarah Chen stood waiting for them in the center of the bay, and Vex's first impression was how remarkably unremarkable she appeared. Medium height, brown hair pulled back in a practical style, wearing a standard merchant captain's jumpsuit that showed signs of regular use. She looked exactly like what she claimed to be, a cargo hauler making routine runs through space. "Welcome aboard the starbound merchant," she said with genuine warmth, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "I'm Sarah Chun. You must be Captain Vex. I have to say, your ship's tactical approach was quite impressive. Very professional." Vex stared at the offered hand without taking it, his yellow eyes scanning the cargo bay for threats or traps. What he found instead was even more unsettling. Everything appeared exactly as it should, except for the small details that suggested careful preparation. "You're not afraid," he stated, his voice carrying the menacing tone that had intimidated hundreds of crews. Sarah's face lit up with what appeared to be delight. "Afraid? Why would I be afraid? This is fascinating. I've been studying piracy tactics for months now, but I've never had the opportunity to observe them firsthand. This is like having a masterclass from experienced practitioners." Grix's weapon remained trained on their host, but his expression showed confusion rather than confidence. "Lady, we're here to rob you. You should be terrified." "Rob me? Oh, you mean requisition my cargo for your operational needs?" Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That makes perfect sense from a resource allocation standpoint. May I ask what specific items you're looking for? I'd hate for you to waste time searching through stuff that won't be useful to your particular ship configuration." The 4 pirates exchanged glances that conveyed their shared bewilderment. This was not following any script they had ever encountered in their collective years of piracy. Sarah gestured toward a control console that displayed detailed cargo manifests. "I'm carrying refined plasma coils, quantum computing cores, medical supplies, and about 2 tons of Altarian coffee beans. The plasma coils might be compatible with your ship systems, but the quantum cores probably won't work with Krillian technology without significant modifications." Thorek's massive frame shifted as he tried to process what was happening. "How do you know what kind of ship we're flying?" "Oh, that was easy to determine from your engine signatures and weapons configuration," Sarah replied cheerfully. "Modified Krillian assault vessel, probably built for speed and intimidation rather than sustained combat. Very effective design for your operational requirements." She pulled up a detailed schematic that made Vex's blood run cold. The display showed the Crimson Fong's exact specifications, including modifications that should have been impossible to detect from external scans. "Your ship has some interesting customizations," Sarah continued, apparently oblivious to the growing panic on the pirates' faces. "The engine modifications are particularly clever. You've sacrificed some armor protection for increased maneuverability, which is exactly the right trade-off for hit-and-run tactics." Zara's multiple eyes were now focused entirely on Sarah with an intensity that suggested predatory calculation. "How could you know about our internal modifications?" Sarah's expression brightened even further, as if she had been hoping someone would ask that question. "Passive sensor analysis combined with historical research and probability mathematics." Humans are naturally good at pattern recognition, and I've made it something of a hobby. She walked over to another console and began displaying information that made the pirate's confidence evaporate like water in a vacuum. Ship registrations, cargo manifests, crew compositions, and operational patterns for dozens of vessels appeared on the screen in neat, organized rows. I've been tracking ship movements through the sector for about 6 months now, Sarah explained with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a favorite pastime. It's amazing how much you can learn about different crews just from observing their behavioral patterns. The display zoomed in on a section labeled the Crimson Fong Operational Analysis. What appeared was a complete breakdown of their piracy activities, including targets, success rates, crew psychology profiles, and tactical preferences. You gentlemen favor small, independent traders with minimal security, Sarah read from her notes. You prefer intimidation over violence, which suggests either moral restraints or practical risk management. Your success rate is approximately 87%, which is quite impressive for this sector. Grix's weapon was now shaking in his hands. You've been studying us. Not just you specifically, but your operational category in general, Sarah replied. Pirates, raiders, salvagers, mercenaries. It's all part of my research into interspecies conflict resolution methodologies. She gestured to another section of her display, which showed psychological profiles that were disturbingly accurate. Vex saw his own leadership style, described in clinical terms that made him feel exposed and vulnerable. The interesting thing about Krillian pirates, Sarah continued, is that you operate on an honor-based, hierarchical system that prioritizes crew loyalty over pure profit maximization. It makes you more stable than human pirate organizations, but also more predictable in your decision-making processes. Pip's skin had cycling through colors so rapidly that he looked like a malfunctioning hologram. Why are you telling us this? Sarah paused in her presentation and looked at him with what appeared to be genuine concern. Are you feeling all right? Your chromatic patterns suggest severe stress. I have some medical supplies if you need them. We're pirates, Thorek rumbled in confusion. We just boarded your ship to rob you. Why are you offering us medical assistance? Because you're sentient beings experiencing distress, Sarah replied as if the answer should be obvious. The fact that we have conflicting professional interests doesn't mean I want you to suffer unnecessarily. She walked over to a medical kit and began pulling out supplies. Besides, stress impairs cognitive function, and I need you thinking clearly for the next part of my research. Vex felt control of the situation slipping through his claws like space dust. What research? Sarah's eyes lit up with the fervor of a scientist on the verge of a breakthrough. I'm testing a theory about human-alien interaction protocols. See, most species approach conflict resolution through either dominance assertion or resource negotiation. But humans have this unique tendency to transform confrontational situations into collaborative problem-solving opportunities. She began setting up what looked like recording equipment while continuing her explanation. My hypothesis is that pirates, like yourselves, aren't really criminals in the traditional sense. You're entrepreneurs operating in an unregulated market with limited resource allocation options. The pirates stared at her as if she had begun speaking in mathematical equations. Think about it, Sarah continued enthusiastically. You identify underutilized resources, perform wealth redistribution services, and provide security reality checks for inadequately protected merchants. From an economic standpoint, you're fulfilling several important market functions. Grix lowered his weapon slightly, his mind struggling to process this radically different perspective on his chosen profession. Are you saying piracy is good? I'm saying it's a predictable response to systemic resource distribution inequalities, Sarah replied. Most pirates are intelligent, capable individuals who have been forced outside legal economic structures by circumstances beyond their control. She pulled up another display, this one showing economic data from across the sector. Look at these numbers. Independent traders like myself can charge whatever the market will bear because there's no effective competition. Pirates like you help regulate those prices by increasing the operational risks for merchants who overcharge. Thorax rocky features somehow manage to convey thoughtfulness. You're saying we're performing an economic service? Absolutely. Your market regulators, resource redistributors, and security consultants all rolled into one. The problem isn't what you do, it's how you do it. Sarah activated her recording equipment and turned to face the group with obvious excitement. Which brings me to my actual research project. I want to demonstrate that piracy encounters can be transformed into mutually beneficial exchanges through proper communication and creative problem solving. Vex felt like he was drowning in concepts that his predatory brain was not equipped to handle. What are you proposing? A practical demonstration of alternative piracy methodologies, Sarah replied with the confidence of someone who had thought through every possible angle. Instead of taking my cargo by force, let me show you how to acquire resources through cooperative negotiation techniques. She gestured toward her cargo manifests with the air of someone about to reveal a magnificent surprise. I'll give you everything you came here to take, plus some additional items that might be useful to your operation. In exchange, you participate in my research and provide feedback on the effectiveness of different interaction. Protocols. The four pirates looked at each other with expressions that ranged from bewildered to terrified. This was so far outside their normal experience that none of them had any idea how to respond. The best part, Sarah continued with growing enthusiasm, is that this approach eliminates all the negative aspects of traditional piracy. No violence, no threats, no risk of merchant escorts showing up for revenge. Just a straightforward resource exchange between professionals who understand each other's operational requirements. She paused and looked around at their stunned faces with what might have been concern. Unless you prefer the traditional approach, I've prepared countermeasures for that too, but they're much more complicated and significantly less pleasant for everyone involved. Vex realized that his crew was looking to him for guidance in a situation that no pirate captain in galactic history had ever faced. They had come here to commit a simple robbery and instead found themselves participants in some kind of revolutionary experiment in interspecies relations. The worst part was that everything Sarah Chun said made perfect sense. Lessons learned 2 hours later, Captain Vex found himself sitting in the starbound merchant's surprisingly comfortable conference room, holding a steaming cup of genuine Earth coffee, and listening to Captain Sarah Chin explain why his entire approach to piracy was fundamentally flawed. The situation had become so surreal that his brain had simply stopped trying to process it through normal pirate logic. The problem with traditional piracy, Sarah was saying as she gestured to a holographic display showing various ship configurations, is that it's built on an adversarial model that creates unnecessary risk for everyone involved. Grix, who had somehow been convinced to set down his weapon in exchange for what Sarah called a more collaborative seating arrangement, stared at the display with the expression of someone having their worldview systematically dismantled. But we're pirates. Adversarial is what we do. That's exactly my point, Sarah replied with the enthusiasm of a teacher whose students were finally grasping a difficult concept. You've accepted a professional identity that limits your operational efficiency and increases your liability exposure. She manipulated the display to show comparative risk assessments that made Vex head hurt. According to Sarah's analysis, traditional piracy had a 73% probability of eventually resulting in crew casualties, ship loss, or imprisonment. Her alternative approach showed risk factors so low they barely registered on the scale. The thorax massive frame shifted in what had clearly been a custom-built chair designed to accommodate his species' unique physiology. Lady, you're saying we should stop being pirates? I'm saying you should evolve beyond piracy into something more sophisticated and profitable, Sarah corrected. Think of it as a career advancement opportunity. Pip's skin had finally settled into a steady blue-green pattern that suggested cautious optimism rather than panic. What would we become instead? Sarah's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who had been waiting for exactly that question. Independent resource acquisition specialists with flexible service portfolios. The conference room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's environmental systems. The four pirates stared at her with expressions that suggested they were trying to translate her words into a language their brains could process. "You mean we'd still be stealing things," Zara said slowly, "but we'd call it something else. You'd be providing services that the current economic system doesn't officially recognize," Sarah clarified. "Resource reallocation, security consulting, risk assessment, and market regulation through selective intervention." She pulled up another display, this one showing what appeared to be a business plan complete with projected revenues, operational costs, and growth strategies. The beautiful thing about humans is that we've learned to package traditionally antisocial activities as legitimate business services. Vex found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. The numbers on Sarah's display were significantly higher than anything his piracy operation had ever generated. "This can't be legal." "It's not illegal if you structure it correctly," Sarah replied with a smile that suggested she had given this considerable thought. "Private security consulting, asset recovery services, hostile takeover negotiations, and competitive intelligence gathering are all perfectly legitimate business activities." She manipulated the display to show organizational charts that transformed the Crimson Fong from a pirate ship into what appeared to be a respectable corporate entity. Captain Vex becomes Chief Executive Officer. Grix handles security operations. Thorak manages asset recovery. Zara coordinates intelligence gathering. Pip handles communications and client relations. The pirates stared at their new job titles with the bewildered expression of people who had accidentally wandered into the wrong meeting. "The best part," Sarah continued, "is that your existing skill sets transfer directly to these new roles. You already know how to identify valuable targets, assess ship capabilities, coordinate boarding operations, and negotiate under pressure. Those are exactly the skills that legitimate businesses pay premium rates for." Grix raised what passed for his hand among Krillians. "But what about the fun parts? The excitement, the danger, the thrill of the hunt?" Sarah's expression became serious, and for the first time since they had met her, she looked less like an enthusiastic researcher and more like the military veteran she claimed to be. "Trust me, legitimate security work provides plenty of excitement and danger. The difference is that instead of everyone trying to kill you, you have clients who actually want you to succeed." She pulled up a new section of her presentation that showed case studies of successful career transitions. "I've been in contact with several former pirate crews who have made this transition. Their average lifespan has increased by 237%, and their income has tripled." Thorak's voice carried a note of skepticism that his rocky features couldn't quite convey. "If this is so great, why isn't everyone doing it?" "Because most pirates don't have access to the kind of strategic analysis and business development resources that humans specialize in," Sarah replied. "You've been operating in isolation, making tactical decisions without long-term strategic planning." She gestured toward the conference room around them, which Vex was beginning to notice contained equipment far more sophisticated than anything typically found on civilian vessels. "This ship isn't just a cargo hauler. It's a mobile research and development platform. I've been traveling through different sectors, studying various forms of interspecies commerce and conflict, developing solutions for systemic problems." Pip's skin flickered through several color patterns before settling on something that suggested cautious curiosity. "What kind of solutions?" "Mostly ways to transform zero-sum conflicts into positive-sum collaborations," Sarah replied. "Pirates versus merchants is a classic example. Instead of one side winning and the other side losing, we create scenarios where everyone benefits." She activated another display that showed the cargo manifest they had discussed earlier. "For instance, you came here to steal my cargo. Traditional piracy would result in you getting some valuable goods, me losing my investment, and everyone involved accepting unnecessary risks." The display shifted to show Sarah's alternative proposal. "My approach gives you access to cargo with higher resale value than what you would have taken, eliminates your operational risks, provides me with valuable research data, and creates a foundation for ongoing business relationships." Vex felt like his brain was trying to process concepts that were slightly too large for his mental framework. You're giving us more than we were going to steal? I'm investing in proof-of-concept demonstration, Sarah corrected. If this interaction model proves successful, it could revolutionize how resource conflicts are resolved throughout the galaxy. She stood up and walked to the viewport, where the Crimson Fong was visible docked to her ship like a parasite that had somehow become a symbiotic partner. The thing about humans is that we think in terms of systems rather than individual events. We don't just solve immediate problems, we redesign the underlying structures that create those problems. Zara's multiple eyes tracked Sarah's movements with what might have been admiration. You're trying to eliminate piracy by making it unnecessary? I'm trying to channel the entrepreneurial energy that drives piracy into more productive and sustainable directions, Sarah replied. Pirates are naturally innovative, adaptable, and willing to take risks. Those are exactly the qualities that successful businesses need. She turned back to face the group with obvious excitement. Imagine what you could accomplish if instead of working against the existing economic system, you were working with it. The conference room's communication system activated, and a pleasant, artificial voice filled the space. Captain Chun, incoming transmission from the Terran Commercial Development Authority. Sarah's expression brightened even further, which Vex hadn't thought was possible. Perfect timing. That's probably the response to my preliminary proposal. She activated the communication display, and suddenly the conference room was filled with the holographic presence of what appeared to be a human bureaucrat in an expensive suit. Captain Chun, the figure said with professional enthusiasm, I've reviewed your research proposal regarding alternative conflict resolution methodologies. The authority is prepared to offer full funding for a comprehensive pilot program. Vex felt the universe tilt slightly on its axis. Funding. The bureaucrat's attention shifted to the pirates with interest rather than alarm. These must be your research subjects. Excellent diversity in species representation. The authority is particularly interested in your theories about transforming antisocial economic behavior into legitimate business development opportunities. Sarah gestured toward the pirates with obvious pride. May I present Captain Vex and his crew from the Crimson Fong. They've been invaluable partners in developing our preliminary interaction protocols. Outstanding, the bureaucrat replied. The authority is prepared to offer them full business development support, including legal consultation, technology upgrades, and access to our client referral network. Thorak made a sound like rocks grinding together, which Vex had learned to interpret as profound confusion. Are we being hired by the human government? You're being offered the opportunity to participate in a revolutionary business development program, Sarah corrected. Think of it as the galaxy's first pirate rehabilitation initiative. The bureaucrat nodded enthusiastically. The Terran Commercial Development Authority recognizes that independent operators like yourselves possess valuable skills that are currently underutilized by the legitimate economy. Our goal is to provide pathways for integrating those skills into productive and profitable business models. Grix's scarred features somehow managed to convey incredulity. They want to help us stop being pirates? They want to help you become something better than pirates, Sarah replied. More profitable, more sustainable, and significantly less likely to result in violent death. The bureaucrat manipulated his own display to show contract terms that made Vex's eyes widen with amazement. The initial development package includes ship upgrades, legal registration, insurance coverage, and guaranteed contracts worth approximately 10 times your current annual revenue. Pip's skin cycled through so many colors that he looked like a malfunctioning rainbow. 10 times. Conservative estimate, the bureaucrat confirmed. Most participants in similar programs report revenue increases of 15 to 20 times their previous illegal operations. Sarah walked back to the conference table and sat down with the satisfied expression of someone whose carefully laid plans were finally coming together. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it solves multiple problems simultaneously. You get legitimate careers with better pay and working conditions. Merchants get professional security services instead of piracy threats. The galactic economy benefits from improved resource allocation efficiency. She gestured toward the viewport, where both ships were visible against the starfield. And humans get to demonstrate that our approach to problem-solving can create positive outcomes for everyone involved. Vex looked around at his crew, seeing his own amazement reflected in their faces. 3 hours ago, they had been pirates attempting a routine robbery. Now, they were apparently business partners in some kind of interspecies economic development program. There's just one condition, Sarah added with a slight smile that suggested this was the part she had been saving for last. The pirates tensed, waiting for the catch that would make this too-good-to-be-true situation make sense again. You have to help me update those warning broadcasts that brought you here in the first place, Sarah continued. Instead of warning pirates away from human ships, we're going to start advertising the career development opportunities available to pirates who make contact with human research vessels. She activated one final display that showed a revised warning message. Attention, all independent operators. Human merchant vessels offer legitimate career advancement opportunities for qualified candidates. Contact protocols available through standard communication channels. Transform your skills into sustainable prosperity. Grix stared at the message with the expression of someone watching his entire worldview collapse and rebuild itself in real time. You want to use us as advertising? I want to use your success as proof that humans can solve problems in ways that benefit everyone involved, Sarah replied. Think of it as the galaxy's first pirate-to-professional transition program. 6 months later, the Crimson Fong, now registered as an independent security consultation vessel, was escorting a convoy of merchant ships through the same sector where they had once hunted for victims. Captain! Vex, now officially designated as Chief Executive Officer of Crimson Security Solutions, was reviewing quarterly profit reports that exceeded his wildest dreams from his piracy days. Incoming transmission, Pip announced from his position at the communications console. His official title was now Director of Client Relations, and his previously nervous demeanor had been replaced by professional confidence. Display it, Vex ordered, settling into his captain's chair with the satisfaction of someone whose career change had exceeded all expectations. The holographic display showed another pirate ship, this one broadcasting the traditional threats and demands that Vex remembered all too well. This is Captain Scar of the Bloodraiser. Prepare to be boarded and your cargo confiscated. Vex activated his own communication system with a smile that his crew had learned to recognize as the expression of someone about to make another convert to Sarah Chen's revolutionary business philosophy. This is Captain Vex of Crimson Security Solutions, he replied with the tone of someone offering valuable career advice. Before you do anything you might regret, I'd like to tell you about some exciting business development opportunities that might interest you and your crew. In the background, he could hear Grix chuckling as he monitored the pirate ship's confused response. Their former weapons officer, now Director of Security Operations, had become remarkably good at explaining the benefits of legitimate employment to skeptical pirates. The transformation of piracy from a criminal enterprise into a career development opportunity had become so successful that the Terran Commercial Development Authority was now expanding the program to other sectors. Captain Sarah Chun had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Economic Integration, and her research was being studied at universities across the galaxy. The warning broadcasts that had once warned merchants about dangerous human ships had been replaced with advertisements for the most successful career transition program in galactic history. Pirates throughout the sector were now actively seeking out human vessels, not to rob them, but to inquire about business opportunities. And somewhere in the depths of space, Captain Sarah Chun was probably working on her next project to solve problems that everyone else had accepted as unsolvable, armed with nothing but human creativity, genuine caring for others, and an unshakable belief that there had to be a better way to do things. Because that, ultimately, was what made humans truly dangerous. Not their weapons or their technology or their military capabilities, but their stubborn refusal to accept that any problem was too complicated to solve or any conflict too entrenched to resolve. They just needed to find the right approach, gather sufficient data, and apply enough creative thinking to transform everyone involved from enemies into partners. That IT was the galaxy was beginning to learn a remarkably effective strategy